Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. With the release of AQ40 coming out shortly on the new anniversary realms, I wanted to make a few videos talking about tanking Twin Emperors as a Warlock. As you may know, you may be asked to tank in this fight because a Warlock is the most common choice to tank the caster mob because it is immune to physical damage, and as far as casters are concerned, Warlocks have the potential to have the most survivability as well as the most threat. So you may be asked to tank, and I want you to be prepared. The last video on my channel is talking about specialization choices for tanking Twin Emperors, both the specs you're probably familiar with, like SM Ruin or DS Ruin, as well as some specs that are tailored specifically towards tanking Twin Emperors, such as DS Emberstorm or Soul Link. But this video is me covering gearing. When you're choosing your gear for tanking Twin Emperors, you want to keep in mind both threat and survivability. Survivability being high stamina and high shadow resistance, and then threat being like your plus shadow damage, plus spell damage, but in particular fire damage, your crit and your hit. And you kind of have to weigh both threat and mitigation when you're choosing your gear, as well as what spec you're playing. For instance, if you're playing like Soul Link with Master Demonologist, you can gear more towards threat, whereas if you're playing a very threat-heavy spec like DS Emberstorm, you may have to gear more towards mitigation. But with that said, in this video I'm going to be covering every slot of gear. I'm going to be giving a few options, both shadow resistance and non-shadow resistance options. And then at the end I'm going to go over my character's gear and what I chose, why I chose it, and why you may or may not make the same choices. But with that said, let's get into the video. So starting with the Helm, I would say there's two noteworthy options, being the Tier 2 Helm or Mission Dare. And you're going to want to put either, as far as enchanting them, the ZG enchant is the best because it gives you stam and spell power. But two other options would be the 100 health Arcanum or the 8 spell power Arcanum. As a rule, I would say Tier 2 Helm's probably a little bit better than Mish because it has 11 more stam and 10 shadow resistance, as well as still having a lot of spell power. But if you don't feel like you need shadow resistance from your Helm slot, Mission Dare does have a lot more threat with that additional 2% crit and 3 spell damage. So I'd say these are like your two Helm options. For the neck, for a non-shadow resistance piece, you're going with Choker the Firelord. Good stamina on it and a lot of spell power. But if you want shadow resistance from your neck, and I think neck is a good choice to get shadow resistance, a good slot, you're either going with this talisman from Dire Maul. It's a BOE, so you can just buy it on the auction house, but if you waited until now to buy it, it's probably quite expensive. Last I checked, it was like pushing 600 gold. But this is a good neck as well, with 9 stam and 15 shadow res. But a budget option is this Fellstone Good Luck Charm. This is from a small quest chain in WPL. Should only take you about half an hour. And then boom, 13 shadow resistance neck. Not a whole lot worse than this talisman, and it's free. So this is a good choice as well. For shoulders, you're either going to want to put an 18 spell power ZG enchant or the 5 shadow resistance enchant. And I would say your two best is either the Tier 1 or Mantle of Blackwing Cabal. As a rule, I would say Tier 1 is the best because it has the most stamina, and it is lacking in spell damage. It only has 9, but it has a lot of stamina, and it has 7 shadow resistance. But if you don't feel like you need that shadow resistance, you could potentially go with Mantle of Blackwing Cabal with the 34 spell damage. Very nice. But another option may be Tier 2. It does not have shadow resistance like Tier 1. It has fire resistance instead. And it has less stamina, and less int, and less spirit. But it has a fair amount more spell damage. But I would say that does not outweigh the things that Tier 1 has, except for potential set bonuses. Tier 2 has a worthwhile 3 set and potentially a 5 set as well. And you may wear these to contribute to set bonuses if you don't want to wear Tier 2 in some other slots. So I wanted to mention Tier 2 shoulders, but as a rule I would say Tier 1 are your best, followed by Mantle of Blackwing Cabal if you're trying to drop shadow resistance. Now for the cloak, there's a lot of choices. You're going to want a 10 shadow resistance enchant on your cloak. And first let's start with the non-shadow resistance ones. You're either going Cloak of Consumption or Cloak of the Broodlord. Cloak of the Broodlord has 10 more stamina, which helps with tanking, and it has a bit more spell damage, but it is lacking that 1% hit, which in shadow resistance gear you're probably pretty low on hit. But if you do want shadow resistance on your cloak, and I think cloak is a good slot to get shadow resistance from, I would say there's 3 noteworthy choices. You have the Pale Moon Cloak from Stratholme, 12 stam, 10 shadow res. This BOE Cloak, this is also, you can just buy it on the auction house, but it is probably expensive. The last I checked it was like 450 gold. But I would not really buy this cloak because I don't really think it's even any better than this Pale Moon Cloak from Stratholme, which if you ran Stratholme during Prebis, you probably got this. Because it has 2 more shadow res, but it has 7 less stamina. So I would say it's really like a side grade. Another option is this Archivist Cape, which I also got during like phase 1 and 2. I got the of shadow resistance roll, and it was plus 15 shadow res. But similar to this cloak, I would say it's not really even any better than this Pale Moon Cloak because it will have 5 more shadow res, but no stamina. Whereas this has 12 stamina. So if you're going with the shadow resistance cloak, I would probably just stick with the Pale Moon Cloak that you probably already got from running Stratholme a million times. Personally. But if you don't want shadow res from your cloak, definitely go with one of these 2. Chest. There's not really a noteworthy shadow resistance chest. So I would say you're either wearing Tier 2 or Epic PvP based on what set bonuses you're going for, if you're going for any set bonuses. Not considering set bonuses, I would say Tier 2 is a bit better. It has a little bit less stamina, but it has that 1% crit, which is noteworthy for your threat. You're going to want to put 100 health enchant. The reason I mentioned Epic PvP chests is if you're going for 2 set, the chest is a very good option because all the other slots, helm, shoulders, feet, legs, and gloves, all have different pieces of gear that give you shadow resistance. Whereas there's not really a good shadow resistance chest. So if you're going for Epic PvP 2 set, I would wear the chest, which you may or may not be going for. Bracers, there's not really any noteworthy shadow resistance bracers in my opinion, so I would just go with Tier 2 bracers. Has a lot of stamina, a bit of spell power, throw a 9 stamina enchant on it, and you're good to go. Gloves, similar to the chest, I would say based on set bonuses, you might be making your decision. But let's look at these glove choices. We have Tier 2, 17 stam, 10 shadow res, and 15 spell damage, and 1% crit. Or Epic PvP gloves. It has 3 more stam. It does not have any shadow res. It has more spell damage, but you're missing the crit. But you do get this equip bonus that reduces your pushback on Searing Pain, which is noteworthy for when you're tanking Twin Emperors because Searing Pain is what you're spamming. And if their Shadow Bolt is interrupting your Searing Pain, that's kind of a pain in the ass. So the gloves I would wear if I'm going for 2 set. Epic PvP, I would wear gloves and chest. If not, I would go the Nemesis gloves because that 10 shadow res is really nice. I'm moving on to the belt. I would say the best is certainly the Nemesis belt. A lot of stamina, 10 shadow res, and a lot of threat. 1% crit and 25 damage. A very good belt for tanking Twin Emps. Another potential option is the Rune Stygian belt. There's 3 pieces of Rune Stygian, being the belt, feet, and legs. I would say the belt is the weakest in that the alternative tier 2 belt is just so strong. I mean, this is a really nice belt. But if you're desperate and you feel like you need more shadow res, the belt could be a potential choice because it does have 10 more shadow res than tier 2. Moving on to the legs. You're similar to the helm. You're going to want a ZG enchant, ideally. But if you don't want to spend your ZG enchant on your shadow res gear, I would throw a 8 spell power or 100 health on it. But I would say the tier 1 legs are overall the best in that it has 20 stam, 10 shadow res, and 30 spell damage is nice as well. Another potential option is the Rune Stygian leggings. I would say these are better than the belt because this has 15 more shadow res than the tier 1. Still has 13 stam, but no threat stats. So as a rule, I would say tier 1 is better, certainly. But if you're desperate, I want to mention Rune Stygian leggings is an option for getting shadow resistance because this, I mean, he has 25 shadow res on these legs, really nice. For feet, similar to the legs, I would say you're choosing between tier 1 and the Rune Stygian boots. Tier 1, I would say, is better as a rule, but I wanted to mention the Rune Stygian boots because they exist and it's a 20 shadow res boots. So if you really are desperate, this could be a potential option. But the tier 1 boots just have so much more stamina, has the 18 spell damage, and it still does have 7 shadow res. So I would say the tier 1 boots are definitely overall a better choice. As far as enchants, ideally, if you're trying to min-max, you're going to have 2 of these, and you're wearing 7 stam whenever you're like world buffed, or you have the speed Zanza, like ZG buff that gives you speed, or the Zanza gives you speed, because they do not stack with minor speed enchant. But whenever you don't have world buffs, if you wipe for whatever reason early in the raid, you're going to want to pair with minor speed. I personally just have minor speed on my boots. I'm not really too worried about the 7 stamina. But if you're min-maxing, you're going to have like 2 pairs of these. For the rings, there's a lot of choices. So let's start with ZG rings. These are very nice because they give you 3% hit once you have the 2 set. You get 1 hit from this ring, 1 hit from this ring, and then the 2 set is 1% hit. And it has a bit of spell damage, bit of stam, and it's a good overall set of rings. Other options is non-ZG rings. So we have Band of Force Concentration is by far the best one. It has 9 stam, 12 int, hit, and a lot of spell damage. Very nice. You're going to be pairing that with either this stamina ring from BWL, which not a whole lot of people are super crazy about, so you can potentially get this if you like tell the loot master or whoever, like, I would actually use this for tanking twins. They may give it to you. 28 stamina on a ring is very nice. Other options, the more traditional ones, would be like Band of Servitude from ZG with 23 spell damage and 8 stam, or just a ring of spell power. No stam, unfortunately, but just a lot of spell damage is nice. Or you're going to go with Shadow Resistance rings. You can get upwards of plus 21 and just buy them from the auction house. And basically, they're just going to be more expensive the more Shadow Res you want. Like the 21 Shadow Res rings are on the auction house for more than like the plus 20, which is more expensive than the plus 19. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a moment. My son woke up. I had to put him back in his bed. But I believe I was talking about Shadow Resistance rings. I was saying they can be upwards of 21 Shadow Resistance. And just buy them from the auction house. The less Shadow Resistance, the cheaper. Personally, I bought 2 plus 18s during like phase 1 for like 5 gold each. And I've just been holding on to them since. I would either, as far as rings are concerned, I would either go double ZG, Band of Force Concentration with one of these, or Band of Force Concentration and 1 Shadow Resistance ring, or just go double Shadow Resistance ring. And definitely, ring slot is potentially a pretty good one to get a lot of Shadow Resistance. For trinkets, You have your Nels tier. If you're lucky enough to have this, you never take it off under any circumstance, ever. It's amazing. We have your on use, either TOEP or ZHC, very good for snap threat. And then you also have your shadow reflector. The on use is useless. It doesn't do anything when taking twins, but just 20 shadow res on it is nice. And you can have two of these. I think in many circumstances it's a little overkill to have two of these because you have to spend the gold to craft a second one, and the only circumstance you're using it is tanking twins, but that is a potential option. For weapons, 30 spell power is your enchant, and you're either gonna, ideally, you have rank 14 or Staff of the Shadow Flame, potentially, or ideally. Yeah, not anything to say. You're not looking for shadow res from your weapons, or from your main hand, let me say. If you are using like rank 14 or like Claw, Chromag, or Mage Blade or something, you're gonna have an offhand. And I would say your noteworthy offhands is like rank 14, giving you a lot of stamina and some spell damage, or Jindo's, which has less stamina, a little bit less damage, but that 1% hit is very nice. As a rule, I would say Jindo's is a little bit better than rank 14, just because you're so starved for hit and shadow resistance gear. You're not like wearing Bloodvine and stuff, right? So any hit you can get, I would try to get if you can. Shadow resistance option is this Skull of Burning Shadows from Stratholme. It's kind of crappy. It just has 10 shadow res, but if you need shadow resistance, that's a potential option. And now let's talk a bit about potential set bonuses. I talked about set bonuses a bit earlier, but I wanted to kind of go in depth regarding what I was talking about. So for tier 2, there are two noteworthy set bonuses, being the 3 set, gives you spell damage. I would say you're pretty much always going to wear this 3 set. Just there's a lot of tier 2 that has shadow resistance, and a lot of it's really good. You should be wearing at least like 3 pieces of it. The 5 set is nice, but I wanted to talk a bit about this because this is only applicable to if you're playing Soul Link, which you may be playing for taking twins, and you have your Fell Hunter out, and your Fell Hunter is taking 30% of your damage via Soul Link. I was curious, does this 130 spell resistance on my Fell Hunter help mitigate the amount of damage he takes, since I'm taking Shadow Bolt damage, like all shadow damage? Does the Soul Link damage transfer, is it affected by your Fell Hunter having a whole lot of spell resistance? And I tested it out. I had a Warlock Shadow Bolt me a bunch, and I ran the numbers both with and without 5 set, and I've determined that this is not affecting how much damage your Fell Hunter takes. It doesn't matter. You might think it might, just because shadow resistance and your Fell Hunter's taking part of your damage, but no. This 130 spell resistance does not affect how much damage your Fell Hunter takes via Soul Link. However, that does not mean the 5 set is useless, because 20 stamina is still pretty nice on your Fell Hunter. If you're playing Soul Link, still a noteworthy set bonus, just with the stamina. Even ignoring the spell resistance, 20 stamina is pretty nice for your Fell Hunter if you're playing Soul Link. If you're playing like DS Ruin or DS Ember Storm, obviously you don't need to worry about this because you're not using a Fell Hunter. But if you're playing MD Ruin or Soul Link, the 5 set giving your pet 20 stamina, or I guess MD Ruin, it doesn't really matter because you don't have Soul Link. If you're playing Soul Link, the 20 stamina is nice, but this resistance does not matter. But then Epic PvP 2 set is another noteworthy set bonus, which is 20 stamina on your character, which is nice for tanking. Like a lot of warriors wear like 2 set PvP gear just because the 20 stamina is really nice. But now that I've talked about each slot of gear, both shadow resistance and non-shadow resistance options, let's take a look at like my shadow res setup. So this is what I've chosen potentially for my first kill. Before I go into it, all my pieces, I want to mention that I feel like I am quite over prepared. I don't believe I need to be playing Soul Link and have all this shadow resistance necessarily to survive. But just for the first 1 or 2 kills till my guild kind of gets the feel for the fight, I want to be very prepared as far as surviving. My only concern with this setup, I have no concern with survivability, but I have a little bit of a concern with threat, which is why I plan to remove shadow resistance and wear more threat gear, or respec out of Soul Link into DS Emberstorm in the near future for a lot more threat. But for the time being, just for the first kill or 2, I wanted to just be very tanky. And unfortunately, if the Ignite Mage is blasting, he might have to watch his threat meter. But I really don't think it's going to be too much of a problem, just because Searing Pain does do so much threat. But let's look at the gear. So I'm wearing tier 2 Helm with 8 spell damage, the Talisman from Dire Maul, tier 1 shoulders with shadow resistance, Pale Moon Cloak with shadow resistance, tier 2 chest with 100 health, tier 2 bracers with stamina, rank 14 weapon, this crappy offhand. Oh, I did forget to make a slide for wands. This wand is my wand of choice, Serpentine Sculler. This is from Jed. If you farmed Briarwood Reed during like phase 1 and 2 like me and were unlucky, didn't get Reed for quite a while, you probably saw a lot of these wands, and hopefully you picked one up because it's a good shadow resistance wand. If you don't wear this wand, you're going Touch of Chaos or Dragon's Touch for the stamina. Probably Touch of Chaos, I would say, is a little better, just some more threat. But this wand is very nice. I'm wearing tier 2 gloves, tier 2 belt, tier 1 legs with 8 spell damage, tier 1 boots with minor speed, 2 plus 18 rings, 1 shadow reflector, and 1 toe up. If I had Nel's tier, I would be wearing Nel's tier instead of toe up. But my guild gave it to a mage, and then he quit the game. It is what it is. But yeah, this is my plan. So you see 245. This is with no like outside buffs. I just have my demon armor. When I get the priest shadow resistance buff, that's plus 60. So that'll put me at 305. And the hard cap is 315. Like I said before, I believe I am over prepared as far as survivability. I'm also going to be using like food buff, elixir of fortitude, like Rumsey Rum Black Label, Flask of Titans. I'm going to be unbooning, Priest Fortitude, Druid Mark of the Wild, all that stuff. I should have quite a lot of health in this set. But for the time being, this is my plan. It's going to be 305 Shadow Res, and I'm playing Soul Link at the moment. But like I was kind of alluding to, I don't think that this is necessary. I just want to make sure the first couple kills are clean. And then I plan to respec into DS Emberstorm, or stay Soul Link but take off a lot of the shadow resistance gear. The first thing I would take off is this offhand. And I would probably just put on like rank 14 offhand. And then I'm also toying with the idea of putting on epic PvP gloves and chest to get that 20 stam 2 set. I'm losing 10 shadow res because I'm taking off Nemesis gloves, but as I potentially plan to drop shadow resistance, that would be a worthwhile choice. And then another swap I'd look to make is if I get Nel's tier, I would take off the shadow reflector, or I may take off like one of these rings for like a Band of Force concentration, right? But those are my plans for the future, potentially. Taking off some shadow res, or just keeping all this shadow res and respecking DS Emberstorm. But for the time being, this is my setup. 5 set, get that 20 stamina on my Fell Hunter is really nice. And I have 3 set tier 1, but that doesn't really do anything for me. The reason I'm just wearing these 3 pieces of tier 1 is because they have shadow resistance on them. Whereas the pants, shoulders, and feet for tier 2 have like fire or nature resistance or whatever. But yeah, that's the video. I want to reiterate that I feel I am over prepared as far as shadow resistance and my spec is concerned. I really don't see how I could possibly die with 305 shadow res and playing Soul Link. But yeah, that's the video. I hope you learn something and make some good choices as far as your gear is concerned and your spec, and are successful in taking Twin Emperors. Thank you for watching.